Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning and giving us an hour of your time. Gracias a todos por acompañarnos esta mañana y brindarnos una hora de su tiempo. My name is Jesus Guzman, and I'm the Policy and Advocacy Director here for Generation Housing. Mi nombre es Jesús Guzmán y soy el director de política y abogacía aquí con Generation Housing. Just a few housekeeping notes here to start our webinar. This event is being simultaneously translated into Spanish. Este evento está siendo transmitido en vivo en español. To access that feature, click on the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen and select Spanish. Para acceder a este servicio, favor de oprimir el botón al fondo de su pantalla y seleccionar el botón para español. We want to thank Gabriel Gutierrez, who is providing our audience live Spanish interpretation this morning. Le damos las gracias a Gabriel Gutierrez, quien nos brinda la interpretación al español esta mañana. Great. So just one more housekeeping note here about participation. For this morning's webinar, we invite the audience to submit a question using the Q&A function, also at the bottom of your screen, and we encourage you to add a question or vote by liking others' questions so that we can get to the ones with the most interest from all of you. So want to just share a couple of notes about today's agenda. We're really excited to bring all of you today's discussion that will offer resources and guidance on building ADUs from some of our local experts that you'll get to hear from in just a moment. This webinar is primarily intended for homeowners, but also with plenty of information that should also be helpful and insightful for those who work in the industry and other public and city staff. So just to review today's agenda, I'll share a bit about our organization, Generation Housing, and then a few words about why we're so excited about the role of ADUs in our efforts to provide housing for our community. Then we'll hear from each of the panelists, and they'll share their opening remarks. And we'll spend the bulk of our time in discussion, and then we'll leave 10 minutes at the end for audience Q&A. And we'll be sure to make sure we get everyone out of here by lunchtime. I know that's something that we're committing to from the get-go. So before I introduce our panelists, I'd like to give just a brief intro to Generation Housing. GenH, or Generation Housing, is a new independent nonprofit organization created to advocate for more housing and more affordable housing in Sonoma County. And GenH advocates for housing not just for its own sake, but because we know that ensuring safe, stable, and affordable housing for all is the strongest lever we can pull to improve individual economic opportunity, health, educational outcomes, and our environment. So I want to share, I think, a few words about ADUs, and I think the way that Generation Housing is thinking about the role that ADU plays in our larger housing conversation. So just a few notes on that. Accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, can really help bridge the middle income housing gap and can contribute significant housing production relatively quickly and affordably, with opportunities to expand access to lower income households. In contrast to ADUs, production is slower for larger scale projects that deliver a high volume of increasingly expensive units that can take many years to entitle and construct. And rising construction costs have led to serious financial feasibility issues and led to a lot of stalled projects. So currently, ADUs represent one of the quickest ways to get an affordable unit online. Most importantly, these units don't require long-term public subsidy, as they generally are rented at naturally occurring affordable rates. They also don't take as long to build as other larger developments due to their construction type and size, and ADUs increase the diversity of housing available and represent really a great infill development opportunity that can increase density in our existing neighborhoods. So with an effective policy in place, and we'll get to hear from some of our panelists who will share some of those policies that are happening locally and at the state level, ADUs can provide units toward RENA obligations, especially in communities that are currently not experiencing significant large-scale development or that are mostly built out. So just a couple more notes here. I think one really positive attribute that we're excited about with ADUs, the per unit cost of an ADU can be as low as a third of the cost to develop compared to other average larger multifamily units. ADUs also offer a low impact means of increasing density in our communities that allow for more intensive and efficient use of land within our current land use pattern. With regards to homeowners, homeowners often cite opportunities to keep their family together and build build wealth as their primary reasons for building an ADU on their property. Some homeowners see ADUs as a source of rental income in the near term and a downsizing opportunity in the future that would allow them to rent out their primary dwelling for retirement income. I think for all of those reasons and more, and we'll hear some more of those reasons from our panelists in just a moment, I think Generation Housing, we're really excited about both the promise and the potential of ADUs as an important part of the overall response to meeting our local housing needs. So I think with that excitement, I'm excited to introduce our really stellar panelists who will be sharing some of their insights and expertise on ADUs with us today. First, before they come up, I want to just express my gratitude to each one of them for being with us. We're really fortunate to welcome Renée Schomp from the Napa Sonoma ADU Center, Amy Nicholson from the city of Santa Rosa, and Katrina Braehmer from the county of Sonoma, who are here to bring us up to date on some of the local policies, state policies as well, and some of the resources available to enable homeowners to build ADUs. So first, I'll introduce and again welcome Amy Nicholson. Amy is a senior planner with the city of Santa Rosa who focuses on developing long-range policy related to housing and other land use issues. Prior to comprehensive planning efforts, Amy worked with Santa Rosa residents and the development community to facilitate the development of residential and commercial projects through the city approvals. Following recent changes to state law, she led the city's most recent comprehensive update to the ADU ordinance. Amy, thank you again so much for being with us today and welcome.
Great. Thank you so much, Jesus, and to Generation Housing and to all of you for attending this webinar. I'm happy to share the perspective from the city of Santa Rosa as it relates to accessory dwelling units. Next slide, please. So just for a little bit of background information, as most of you know, the city of Santa Rosa is the most populated incorporated city within Sonoma County. There's a population of about 177,000 people. And the land of Santa Rosa is unique in that much of it is developed or it's surrounded by development. But this really presents a great opportunity for accessory dwelling units or adding additional residential units because the sites are close to existing utilities and services. So the city has what's called the Planning and Economic Development Department, and this is the department that processes or helps homeowners and developers to go through the development process for any type of residential or non-residential project. And this department is comprised of 4 different divisions. There's planning, building, engineering, and economic development. And so if you're interested in constructing an accessory dwelling unit, you would interact with this department throughout the entire process. And I'd just like to call your attention to some existing resources that we have available at our website, srcity.org/ADU, and also our application, which is available online, and you would also submit it online, and you can get that information at srcity.org/PED. Next slide, please. So over the past decade or so, we've seen some real changes in the number of accessory dwelling unit applications we've received. This graph is only shows data through 2018, but I selected it in an effort to show some of the milestones that are called out on the graph. and the relationship to applications received after those milestones were achieved. As you can see, kind of starting in 2016, the number of applications increased pretty dramatically, in particular in 2018, where a total of 118 applications were received. And if you compare that to 2016, you can really see how interest has peaked over that time period. Some of those milestones I was referencing relate to changes to both state and local law. So in 2017, the state adopted a number of ADU bills to help incentivize these new unit types. And we did see an increase following that adoption. And then in 2018, the City Council adopted an ordinance that either eliminated or reduced fees to construct ADUs, and also built in some additional flexibility for homeowners, which resulted in an even larger increase. The orange area on the bar graph indicates ADU applications that were received within our fire rebuild areas. And then in addition, the blue call out box really just breaks down how fees were changed following the 2018 update to the city's ADU ordinance and the type of cost saving associated with that. In 2019, the city received a total of 163 applications for ADUs. And then this year's obviously been quite different considering the state of the world, but to date, we've received a total of 41 applications. Next slide, please. So as you can imagine, there have been a number of changes to laws and also just general practice and how we think about accessory dwelling units and housing in general. As you know, the state and the county have been experiencing a housing crisis for some time now, and this has really warranted a need to think creatively to address the unique needs of Sonoma County residents. Some things that are really positive about ADUs, as Jesus was mentioning earlier, is that they really provide an affordable housing source. They also allow for people to age in place or downsize, and they provide caregiving opportunities as well. As I alluded to earlier, the city's fee reduction and elimination based on size really did have that positive impact prior to changes in state law, January of this year. And just general streamlined processing has also resulted in additional applications. As we know, the Tubbs fire, which happened in 2017, destroyed thousands of housing units in the county and 3,000 in particular in Santa Rosa. Because the city made some changes to the ADU ordinance prior to many homeowners rebuilding, it likely gave them more flexibility and comfort and made it a little bit more financially feasible for them to consider adding an accessory dwelling unit to their property, where they might not otherwise have gone that path if those changes were not made. And so at this point, there have been 52 ADU applications submitted within the fire rebuild areas, and that does not include the ADUs that were rebuilt, which were formerly existing. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there have been a number of changes that local agencies are implementing now based on the 2020 state ADU bills. Next slide, please. So in response to the changes that came down from the state effective in January, the city adopted an updated ADU ordinance. This ordinance codifies some of the big changes in the state bills, and we're going to be discussing those in some more detail later. I will emphasize or note that the approach was to be as permissive as the state law allows to really try and encourage ADUs as a type of housing within our city, but also to balance that with protecting some of the city's natural resources and our preservation districts. So some examples of how the city's ordinance is a little bit more permissive than what the state mandates includes reduced parking requirements in addition to allowing for the maximum square footage for ADUs, flexibility in design, and then again, to retain the character of the city. We did put in place some alternative requirements that seek to protect our hillside, creekside, and historic neighborhoods. Next slide, please. So I think moving forward, the city is certainly committed to promoting ADUs. Again, they meet many housing needs, and we want to be able to provide all the resources and information and assistance to homeowners or those in the development community. I think if anything, this current pandemic and housing crisis have helped to really encourage that through further streamlining our processes, making it easier. And then certainly we want to continue our collaboration with local partners, including the Napa Sonoma ADU Center that you'll be hearing from soon. Next slide, please. So finally, I'd just like to provide some contact information. If you are interested in building an ADU and just have general questions about getting started, our websites are great resources, but also you can contact a planner or someone in building directly by way of email or phone. And then my contact information is also up there as well. So again, thank you so much.
Amy, thank you for those opening remarks, and everyone, we'll hear from Amy again here in a few minutes during the discussion portion of our agenda. And next, I'd like to introduce Katrina Braehmer. Katrina is a planner with Permit Sonoma, the land use planning and development permitting agency for unincorporated Sonoma County. Her work with the county primarily involves coordinating with property owners and developers to process land use entitlements for residential, commercial, and industrial development proposals. Katrina's efforts at Permit Sonoma focus on housing, design review, land development, and fire rebuilds, largely in the Sonoma Valley and unincorporated Santa Rosa. Katrina, welcome, and again, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Jesus, and thank you to the other panelists and those listening in for joining us. I'm very grateful for this forum, and I'm excited to share some information and resources about the housing opportunities that ADUs can provide. Next slide, please. I'd like to just start by introducing my agency, which is Permit Sonoma. Sorry, next slide, please. So Permit Sonoma, as Jesus mentioned, is the consolidated land use planning and development permitting agency for unincorporated Sonoma County. It consists of a few larger divisions with smaller subsections. One large division is the engineering and construction division, which includes building and safety, code enforcement, engineering, and well and septic. There's the planning division, which consists of project review, which is current planning, and comprehensive planning, which is long range planning. And lastly, the fire prevention and hazardous materials division. Next slide, please. So jumping into ADUs, like Amy had spoken to, over the past few years, changes to state law have progressively made it more permissive to build ADUs in California. So similar to the city of Santa Rosa, the county has experienced a steady upward trend in ADU construction. The number of permitted ADUs in unincorporated Sonoma County has roughly doubled since 2017. And in 2019, 109 new ADUs were permitted. So that excludes those that were rebuilt after fires. And then the most recent and major changes to state law went into effect at the beginning of this year. And one of the more significant provisions of the new law that affects property owners in the county specifically is the removal of minimum lot size requirements for ADUs. So our previous ordinance applied different ADU requirements depending on the size of the lot and the type of water and sewage utility. And so this no longer applies. And like Amy said, we'll talk further about the changes in state law a little later, but some highlights included a new 60-day processing timeline for ADU permit applications, reductions in setback requirements, and limitations to impact fees and utility connection fees for new ADUs. Next slide, please. So with the new state law, the county's ADU ordinance no longer applies as of January of 2020. And so ADU development standards default to those provided by state law unless or until a new ordinance is adopted. So in the county, ADUs are permitted in agricultural, residential, or mixed-use zones. They are not permitted in what is called the Z combining district, which is an overlay zone excluding ADU construction. The Z combining district was placed on certain areas in the county where there is inadequate water supply or sewer services, significant fire hazard, or traffic congestion. And so to build an ADU in the county, only a building permit is required, which you would apply for at Permit Sonoma. And we've developed a checklist consistent with state law as a tool for property owners to evaluate the type of ADU that they can build in the unincorporated county. And that checklist can be found at our website here on the presentation, or you can easily find it by typing in ADU Permit Sonoma into Google. Our website is very accessible and has some, talks you through the process pretty well. Next slide, please. So because permitting can seem daunting to property owners, especially people who are, have never built anything before, I wanted to just briefly discuss Permit Sonoma's process generally. As I mentioned, Permit Sonoma has all of the disciplines in one building that you might need for building and development. So when you're ready to submit a permit or your plans for a permit, you'll always start with a permit technician. And they will review your plans, determine the scope of work, and initialize the application. The permit tech will then route you to various sections required for review, which typically include engineering if the property is served by public sewer and water, well and septic, planning, and fire. And once you've received comments or clearances from the other sections, you will end with a permit tech who will route your application to the building plan check section for full review of the plans. And so if development and construction standards are met, plan check will approve the permit for issuance. If it's an ADU, the approval will be within 60 days. And typically this whole process occurs in person at the Permit Sonoma office, but our office also offers an electronic application option. And further, to continue our operations in the age of COVID-19, we've recently started virtual inspections. So now our entire permitting process can occur electronically. And so if you have any questions about permitting, you can email planner@sonomacounty.org or permitsonoma@sonomacounty.org. Next slide, please. And so I've got, looks like I'm on the wrong slide. One more slide, please. Lastly, I just wanted to mention some potential hurdles to building an ADU, which are generally unique to the county context. The majority of land within the unincorporated county does not have access to public sewer and water services and therefore are typically served by private wells and septic systems. So for public health and safety, applicants must demonstrate that they have suitable and adequate water and sewage disposal. In designated water scarce areas, property owners must demonstrate sufficient well yield to build an additional dwelling unit. And existing septic systems may require upgrades or capacity expansions to serve the ADU. So we highly recommend that you contact a septic engineer early on in the ADU planning process to understand your options and potential constraints on your property. Lastly, larger parcels of land in the county may be subject to land conservation contracts for agricultural or open space uses. And properties under these types of contracts are not permitted to construct an accessory dwelling unit, but there are other housing options to support agricultural operations. So we recommend contacting the planning division to discuss those options that are unique to your property. So I thank you for your attention, and I'll turn it over to Jesus to continue our conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, Katrina. So I want to introduce our final panelist before we move to the discussion portion of our agenda. Renée Schomp, the director of the Napa Sonoma ADU Center. Renée is a lawyer by education and a nonprofit leader by trade. Renée is a native of Sonoma County, and she recently returned after spending the last decade, in the legal sector, predominantly in civil legal aid. Renée is the first director of the Napa Sonoma ADU Center, a fiscally sponsored project based at Napa Valley Community Foundation with support from the Napa Valley Community Foundation and the Community Foundation of Sonoma County. Renée lives in an ADU herself and believes in a future where every person in Napa and Sonoma counties can afford to live and thrive here. Renée, welcome and thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Jesus. I really appreciate your kind introduction, and it's a real pleasure to be here with you and with the wonderful team at Gen H today, as well as with Katrina and Amy. And I'm also so happy to be able to be here with the audience today. We're in month 2 of our formal launch of Napa Sonoma ADU Center. And so I'm really looking forward to getting to know you. For individual homeowners, I hope you'll reach out. I'm gonna do a really brief overview of the services that we're offering right now, as well as the programming that we're planning on putting in place in the next 3 months to a year. So thank you again for all being here. And Gabrielle, I'm going to try to speak slowly, which is against my natural inclination. Slide, please. So a quick snapshot of the Napa Sonoma ADU Center. So as I mentioned, we're in month 2 of our formal launch. It's been a really wonderful experience for me to get to learn the state laws applicable to ADUs, as well as begin to parse all of the differences between ADU processes and rules across all of the individual cities and counties between Napa and Sonoma counties. It's given me a lot of empathy for homeowners who are seeking to understand the processes themselves. And we're so lucky to have wonderful folks like Katrina and Amy and other city and county staff who are here guiding us. And the Napa Sonoma ADU Center is really looking forward to working hand in hand with those local jurisdictions, as well as with individual homeowners and partner nonprofits such as Gen H and others, as we begin to roll out services to support homeowners in building more ADUs in our 2 counties. To that end, our goal as the Napa Sonoma ADU Center is simply put to help homeowners build accessory dwelling units in Napa and Sonoma counties. We began our work by conducting a series of surveys, doing data gathering and market research, and also holding focus groups with local homeowners in Napa and Sonoma counties who have already successfully built ADUs, as well as with builders and architects and with local city and county staff. And our vision is that we can increase housing affordability across the 2 counties through increasing the number of ADUs in the 2 counties. Our focus, as I mentioned, really is on cross-sector collaboration. And our vision is that ADUs can provide homes for folks who live and work in Napa and Sonoma counties who are at between 50 to 80% of area median income. So in the county, in Sonoma County, that translates for a family of 2 at 50% AMI to an annual income of about $43,000. For a family of 2 at 80% AMI, that translates to an annual income of about $69,000. And we know that with many folks still displaced as a result of the wildfires, and folks who are still seeking, who are beginning and will be experiencing the impacts of the COVID-19 crisis, both from an economic and health standpoint, that building ADUs for individual homeowners is a smart investment in their future. And we also see it as a necessary and vital investment in the future of our community. So let me do a quick overview of the services and resources that we're currently providing at Napa Sonoma ADU Center. Slide, please. So right now, if you go to our website at napasonomaadu.org, you can access our ADU fee calculator. And the ADU calculator not only helps homeowners assess the costs, a rough estimate of the cost of building their ADU, it also helps them understand the likely return on investment over time of building an ADU. You can also access individual city and county rules applicable to where your property is located on the website. And you can plug in your individual property address to look up whether or not you can feasibly build an ADU on your property. And for most of you, the answer will be yes. There's also now electronically available an ADU workbook, and the ADU workbook walks you through A to Z, the entire journey from planning, designing, permitting, building, and renting your accessory dwelling unit. And as I mentioned, it's available right now on our website, and it's also soon going to be available in hard copy, which we're really excited about. And it not only has a lot of kind of concrete tips for homeowners, it also has stories about your neighbors who have already successfully built ADUs in Napa and Sonoma counties, as well as sample floor plans. We're also now providing individualized problem-solving support to homeowners throughout that ADU journey. You can contact us at info@napasonomaadu.org. And reach out about any kind of barriers or questions that you're facing, and we'll do our best to work with you, also to liaise with your local jurisdiction, to connect with them and make sure that you have individualized information to help you through the ADU process. If you go to our website, you can also easily sign up for our newsletter to receive information about not only our current services, but also upcoming services, which I will outline for you now. Next slide, please. So coming up in the next few months, we are planning to provide also individualized ADU consultations to homeowners who are interested in building an ADU, to let them know about the feasibility of building an ADU on their property. And we're going to be making that available in a virtual manner in accord with shelter-in-place rules as they continue to evolve. We're also going to have available on our website a vetted list of vendors, including builders, design build firms, architects, prefab companies, property management companies, and more. Those are going to be available, like I said, in the next few months on our website. And if you are a vendor yourself, please reach out to me at info@napasonomaadu.org, as I would love to include you in that vetting process. We're also, as I mentioned, really focused on collaborating closely with city and county staff, working hand in hand to continue the already amazing work that has been done on the jurisdictional level to improve processes around ADUs to support homeowners in building. And we're also going to be collaborating with local jurisdictions to put in place pre-approved designs in certain jurisdictions. Finally, in the coming year, we're hoping to provide tenant recruitment and placement services for homeowners who want to rent their ADUs in partnership with partners in the counties, and also partner with local nonprofits to ensure that homeowners who want to become landlords are educated about landlord best practices and fair housing laws. So that is it in a nutshell, and I will turn it back to you, Jesus. Thanks so much, and looking forward to getting to know all of you in the coming years.
Thank you, Renee. So we'll hear from Renee, Amy, and Katrina in just a moment. And I love seeing all of the questions that are in the Q&A chat box right now. We will try to get to as many of those as we can. And I think we want to try something. I think for Gen H for the first time, we want to do a poll. If Chrissy can help us pull that up, I think that the poll will help, I think, our discussion here, and want to hear from all of you. If you could just take a moment to reply to these two questions that we've posted. The poll is anonymous, and again, the results will help us in our discussion. The two questions that we have are, the first one is, are you considering an ADU now or in the future? And second, what challenges are you or have you experienced when seeking to build an ADU? And so if you will just give this about 15-20 seconds and allow everyone a chance to vote on this poll. Be interested to see our results. Right, so we'll give folks just another second here. And then Chrissy, if we're able to see the results, see if we can share those with everyone. Great. So our first question, are you considering an ADU now or in the future? It looks like the majority of folks at 69% are considering an ADU. And when we asked what challenges are you or have you experienced when seeking to build an ADU, It looks like the majority, and again, for the second question, folks could choose more than one. So we see almost 60% said financing was at the very top. Second, zoning and building codes. And then third, we have not sure where to start, which I think is probably the most honest in terms of there's just so much. And clearly from what we've heard with Amy, Katrina, and Renee, there's a lot that goes into this. And it's why we're so excited to have each one of them here with us today to help walk us through all of these different pieces. Thank you everyone for participating in that poll. We're going to move to the discussion section. We'll spend about 8 to 10 minutes on that part of the agenda, and then we'll make sure we move to the audience Q&A. And we encourage everyone to vote on the questions that you see that are already posted. We'll try to get those to rise to the top and make sure we get to those as time permits. So thank you again, everyone, for the poll. And our first question, I'm going to pose this to our panel here, and I'm going to share really sort of 3 questions, but all in one. And it may seem like a basic question, but I think it's important for all of us to make sure we're on the same page and really clear about our terms and what we're sharing today, which is what's an ADU? What are some of the different types of ADUs? And also, what's a JADU? And I may have pronounced that wrong. Is it a JDU? JADU? But would love to hear from Renee, Amy, Katrina, just to kind of help set the conversation there.
Great. I can go ahead and discuss or define what an accessory dwelling unit or ADU is. So it's a residential dwelling unit. It is secondary to a primary unit that's either proposed or existing on a property. And it does provide complete independent living facilities. So it includes a kitchen and a bathroom. And also it has its own exterior entrance.
And I'll chime in with the different types of ADUs. And I think it's so great that we started with this seemingly basic question, because it's more complex than it initially sounds. So there are about 5 different types of ADUs, and I'll hand it over to Amy in a minute to describe junior ADUs. But basic descriptions of the 5 different types of ADUs. There's a detached ADU, which is a freestanding structure, like a backyard cottage. There's an attached ADU, which shares at least one wall with the primary residence. There's and I'll slow down, Gabrielle. There's an interior conversion, which is built from an existing converted space, such as an attic or a basement, for example. There's a garage apartment, which is a converted or former garage space. And then there's also an above garage ADU, and that's a unit that's built above a garage. And fun fact, I live in an above garage ADU, and I can attest to their efficacy. I'll hand it back over to you, Amy.
Great, thank you. So what is a JADU, or sometimes they're called JADUs, or junior accessory dwelling units? Those are a type of ADU, but they have to fit within more specific parameters. So a JADU must be located within the footprint of a house. So oftentimes it's a conversion of bedrooms or just general living space. They must have an efficiency kitchen, and that's clearly defined in state law, but it's, kind of the bare minimum one would need to be able to cook meals. And then they may or may not have their own sanitation facilities. So if they have shared sanitation facilities with the primary residence, then there must be some type of internal connection from the JADU into the primary residence. If they have an independent bathroom, then they do not have to have any type of interior circulation with the main residence on the property.
Great, thanks everyone. I want to pivot, so from kind of getting an understanding of the different types of ADUs, I know each one of you alluded to some of the state laws that have been approved recently. So I'm curious to hear from each of you. What are some of the allowed locations for ADUs under the new state laws? And I'll I'll throw a second question out there, see if we can add to this as well, which is how did the new state laws impact the ADU process, fees, restrictions, and amnesty for unpermitted ADUs, which I know have also been a hot topic of conversation?
Thanks, Jesus. I can jump in on the first part of your question. So what are the allowed locations for ADUs under the new state laws? So just in short, ADUs can now generally be built on any lot with an existing or proposed single family or multifamily building in a residential or mixed use zone, regardless of the lot size. And both a detached ADU and an interior junior ADU can be built on a single family lot. And then also homeowners associations can't ban ADUs or JADUs regardless of any existing rules and covenants, although HOAs can place reasonable design guidelines on ADUs and junior ADUs.
Okay,
I'll hand it. Yeah.
Sorry about that. I'll just jump in to speak about how new state laws impact the ADU process, fees, owner occupancy restrictions, and also code enforcement or amnesty for unpermitted ADUs. And I may have neglected to say this earlier about JADU, so I want to make sure that I say it. They are limited in size to 500 square feet. And I may have mentioned that, but I thought maybe I left it out. So as we've mentioned a few times, ADUs are subject to kind of a special process in terms of planning. They don't require public meetings and noticing like many other planning projects would. They are ministerial, which means they are reviewed against existing standards like that exist in the zoning code or the building code. That process is much more streamlined for that reason. New state law requires that any accessory dwelling unit building permit is reviewed within a 60-day period of time. New state law also limits how fees are assessed for new ADUs, and accessory dwelling units or junior accessory dwelling units that are below the 750 square foot threshold cannot have certain impact fees or utility connection fees at all. And then based on size and other fees that the jurisdiction has, the fees are kind of tiered as you move up in size typically. In addition, one of the state bills changed how cities or counties regulate unpermitted accessory dwelling units. So there is a period of 5 years that is granted to property owners for them to resolve any unpermitted ADU, so long as there is not a severe health or safety risk.
So thank you, Amy and Renee. I want to turn to Katrina here to ask our final question related to state laws. Katrina, could you share with us how some of these new state laws impact unit sizes and design standards for ADUs?
Of course. So minimally, local agencies must permit a freestanding or attached ADU up to 800 square feet. 16 feet in height and with at least 4-foot side and rear yard setbacks from the property lines. So typical zoning standards like lot coverage, floor area ratios, and open space requirements cannot be applied to an ADU if it would prohibit a construction of an 800 square foot ADU meeting that criteria. Also, no setbacks are required if the ADU is the conversion or replacement of an existing structure, accessory structure like a garage or a shed or a workshop that's closer than 4 feet to the property line. So you wouldn't need to rectify that setback when you converted the structure. And also, unless a local agency adopts a smaller maximum size by ordinance, a detached ADU can be a maximum of 1,200 square feet. And an attached ADU cannot exceed 50% of the floor area of the primary residence. So I do recommend checking in with your local jurisdiction to see if they have adopted an ordinance consistent with state law that might have maximums slightly different than what I'm explaining here.
Great, thank you, Katrina. So I want to pivot our conversation to some of the audience Q&A, and really great to see so many questions that the audience has contributed. So I'm going to pull the first question at the very top, and again, thank everyone for upvoting some of these so that we can try to get to some of the most popular questions that you like asked and answered. The first question that we have, and this is for anybody on the panel that'd like to respond. The first question is there any quantified evidence of what ADUs do to the property value?
This is Renee. I can jump in with a really rough answer to that question, because obviously it's really dependent on so many, like the specific market, etc. But a very rough rule of thumb from my understanding is that an ADU will likely add to the home value, and basically, like if there's new construction of an ADU, it can add 100 times the monthly rental value to your home. Again, very rough, but just for example, if an ADU rents for $1,800 a month, it would add about $180,000 to the value of your home. Other types of ADUs, like interior conversions or junior ADUs, will have a smaller impact on value. So that's a really rough estimate, and I would welcome Amy and Katrina jumping in if they had any kind of differing opinions on the subject.
Great. So we'll, Amy and Katrina, it sounds like we'll jump to the next question. And it's a similar, I think, question in nature. There's a few questions, I think, in this question that an audience member contributed. And it goes, has any study been done to assess changes in values in neighborhoods with ADUs? Generally, how do neighbors tend to respond to ADU additions? So the reception in the neighborhood to ADUs, most people buy into a neighborhood with a certain expectation and density. The ADUs change the number of cars parked on the street, proximity of houses, and people and pets to backyard and side yard neighbors. So broadly, sort of what's the reception to ADUs in a neighborhood?
I can speak a little bit to what I've experienced at the county. I'd say that the county is a very specific context. We tend to have larger parcels. Most of the unincorporated county isn't very urban, and so neighborhoods are pretty spread out, and structures aren't as close together, and there's just not as much density in buildings. But I'd say that for the most part, neighbors are largely receptive in the county to ADUs. I think there's a lot of interest in building ADUs in the county, and there's might be differences within cities, but I'd say overall the trend that we've experienced is that people are excited about this opportunity and the housing opportunities that ADUs can bring.
I can just share a few things that I've heard, but I in no way think that this is an accurate sample size of Santa Rosa residents. I haven't heard any real complaints from neighbors about accessory dwelling units being constructed. Part of that might be because the process is a building permit, and that is not one that is noticed in the same way that many other new developments are. But I think that in many ways, because accessory dwelling units are, they're limited in size, oftentimes they're one story or internal conversions. I don't know that there's as much of a noticed impact in terms of a new large building mass, or even the number of vehicles that might be associated with a house that is pretty limited in size. So in my observation, there has not been really a negative perception so far.
Great. So next question, how long do you have once a permit is received to start building, and does it expire?
So I can speak a little bit to the county. Typically, a building permit, once it's issued, an issued status, meaning that you're allowed to construct, you have a year, or I think it's 2 years actually, to build. But recently, the county has adopted an urgency ordinance that extends the period of time for building permits, both that are active in the permitting process and that are in issued status it's extended that expiration date by, I believe, 100 days. I could get you some specific details. This was just actually last week, but it extends the period of time for expiration pretty significantly past the end date of the local state of emergency due to COVID-19. So I think I saw another question somewhere that was, how does the pandemic affect this? And so permitting processes are still continuing with Permit Sonoma, and we are actively codifying provisions to extend the allowable date for people to construct their issued building permits for ADUs.
Great, thank you, Katrina. So I think the next question might be one that Renee and Amy might be probably the best people to speak to this question in terms of, Ellen Lewis asks, I have a property that I think could support an ADU in the city of Santa Rosa. I'm not sure where to begin, and I'm not sure I can afford building one. Where should I begin? Which I think she speaks for a lot of folks with that question. So I think we've got the right people to help answer that. Amy and Renee, any thoughts on what we can do to help Ellen out?
I can start and then I'll pass it to you, Amy. I think if you'd like to go to napasonomaedu.org, you could start by using our address lookup tool to plug in your specific address and see if you can build an ADU on your property. I'm almost positive the answer will be yes, unless some of those restrictions that Amy had mentioned apply to your property. Then you can also use our ADU calculator, which will give you a rough estimate of costs as well as your return on investment over time. And then also you can look at our ADU workbook, which is available on our website. And it is such a wonderful primer on kind of A to Z, the resources that you'll need to draw upon, etc. And then going forward, like I mentioned before, we're going to be including a vetted pool of vendors on our website to reach out to as you begin the process. But it's also so important to connect directly with your local city staff. And I'll hand it over to Amy on that note.
Great. Yeah, so I think a great first step might be to contact the planning division, and you can contact by email or by phone, and a planner will get back to you and can really kind of do a deep dive into your property, make sure that you're aware of where the ADU could be sited, so we can talk about setbacks and any other type of development standard that you would have to consider prior to thinking about the cost. And so I would say that's step one. And then once you have that information, you could probably work with Napa Sonoma ADU Center to look at the financing and other options, like Renee mentioned, and then engaging with someone that can either help you to design an ADU, or there are many companies now, I don't know that we've brought this up, but companies that have prefab or modular ADUs available, and you can look at a variety of different design types and sizes, and so that can also give you a better idea relative to cost and process. And then once you determine what type of ADU you want to move forward with, then you would go ahead and submit a building permit application to the Planning and Economic Development Department, and we would review it and keep in contact with you, and then hopefully have that approval within the 60-day period.
Great, thank you both. So we'll take one last question. I think this one might be a question for Katrina, given I see water tower, barn, likely in unincorporated parts of the county. And so, Katrina, can you also help so the question is, can you also help in converting existing structures into ADUs? For example, a water tower, a barn, or a garage?
So I've never heard of converting a water tower. That's something that I haven't experienced yet in the county. Or I'm not sure if that's even been done, but definitely a barn or a garage. Something to note is that barns and garages and other accessory structures are typically of a certain building code occupancy. And so it will need to be converted to a residential occupancy structure. And so there are some specific building code requirements that I would have you check in with a contractor with, or with somebody from our plan check division at Permit Sonoma. But that's definitely a possibility and happens often. And sometimes they build ADUs on top of an existing barn or with a new barn or garage. So that's definitely a possibility. Not sure about the water towers though.
Great, thanks, Katrina. If somebody does build an ADU on a water tower, I'd be pretty excited to visit. That seems like a great spot. So I do want to close up there. I know we've got only 3 minutes here before noon. And so I think one thing I'd like to propose is we've got still a number of questions. I'm really glad and grateful that everybody contributed as many questions. I think what we'll do is we'll try to respond to some of these questions and make those available to everybody who participated in a follow-up email, and look out for a link, and we'll try to respond to those as best as we can, or at least point you to some resources that may be able to help address some of those questions. But again, thank you everyone for contributing those questions, and we'll try to respond following this webinar. So I want to move to just closing today's webinar. Again, a big thank you to all of our panelists today: Amy Nicholson from the city of Santa Rosa, Katrina Braehmer from the county of Sonoma, Renée Schomp from the Napa Sonoma ADU Center. This webinar is a part of a series of events that Generation Housing is hosting this month of May as a part of Affordable Housing Month. It's a time of the year to educate and inform the public about the work happening around affordable housing in Sonoma County. And it's really happening across the Bay Area regionally as well. So some really excellent work happening throughout the Bay. This means a lot. It means engaging all of you to talk about what's working, what's still needed, and how do we get there. And hopefully today's conversation contributed towards that. I do want to just share some information. We have one more event coming up tomorrow as part of our Affordable Housing Month series. It's the last one of the month. We're really excited to host a conversation with New York Times journalist Connor Doherty. He's the author of Golden Gates: Fighting for Housing in America. I read this book when it first came out. A really interesting and fascinating look at housing here in California, but really, I think, representative of what's happening across the country. So if you haven't picked that up, we recommend Copperfield's books or any local bookseller to pick up a copy and join us for tomorrow's conversation at 6 p.m. We also want to encourage everyone to visit any and all of our social media channels to stay up to date on any local housing information, and visit our website at generationhousing.org. We thank all of you who have already joined GenH as members since our launch. And if you or your organization would like to join to increase the supply, diversity, and affordability of housing in Sonoma County, please visit our website to join GenH. Again, a big thank you to all of our panelists for all that wonderful information. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. We'll be posting a video recording of today's webinar following, and we'll make sure we get that out to everyone so you can share that with your friends and family. We hope this has been informative for all of you. And in the meantime, please stay safe, healthy, and we look forward to seeing all of you again soon. Thank you and have a great day.